that okay? You good? We're good? Okay. Got thumbs up.
Okay. I don't have my presentation mode, so I'm gonna have to look at my notes. Anyways, if for some of I don't know some of you, so I'll just give a quick brief about me. My name is Clara Bonowitz. I am a professor here at ETSU. We moved here about 2.5 years ago from Illinois, hence no southern accent, for me to teach. I have 4 kids, and so we settled nice here. I've been a practicing clinician for many years before I switched over into academia. My first love was ortho, so I'm also an ATC. So I practiced a lot, actually, in ortho, and then I went over to acute care, did a lot of cardiopulm. That was my second love. But my real passion was kids. Now I get to help spread that here with everybody in the community and my students. So that's just a little bit about me. First, I wanted to thank the district for letting me talk about something that is dear to me, which is advocating for kids with disabilities in this area. So I appreciate that, of being able to talk and tell you about our story. I also wanted to thank our chair for supporting me, also to give time to do this project, and all of my colleagues in the department who put up with me every day and support me as well. I couldn't do this without them. But mostly I wanted to thank the team of us that put this together, because we all work as a team. So even though I'm presenting, we're all doing it together. And as we go through, we'll talk more about who's on the team and how it formed and all kinds of stuff. So this is about Go Baby Go Appalachia. That was what we coined it. And you'll learn that as we go through that there's different areas in the region that have their own Go Babies, and they're all named by where they're at. So we collaborate with the Department of Physical Therapy, and then Milligan, also the College of Public Health, and a lot of community therapists in this region. So what we did is we all formed this collaboration to start what's called Adapt to Play, and we'll get to that at the end. So just some objectives of what I'm going to talk about. So we'll talk about like the background of it, so you understand where it comes from and the philosophy behind it. We'll talk about why early mobility is so important, especially for kids with impairments. Why we wanted to get here in Appalachia, so why we thought it was even more critical over in this area of the country. We'll talk about the different programs and the different philosophies across the state that have it, not just here. And we'll go through a CAR, how we built it for a family, and then the development of the team. So Go Baby Go was started at the University of Delaware. So Cole Galloway is a physical therapist, and he's a professor, and he's a infant behavior expert. And so he has a lab up there, and he wants to provide mobility for children with cognitive or physical disabilities. So he started his infant behavior lab to watch how children learn how to move. So he was really interested in finding what's called the gap, the exploration gap. So that is the difference between what typically developing children learn through exploring and how children learn with physical impairments, and the difference between those. So kids that have a harder time moving, like cerebral palsy, spina bifida, those kind of things. So he was approached by an engineering professor at the university back in 2007, and that engineering says, hey, I have little robots and you have little babies, let's try to figure something out together. So that's kind of like how it was created. And so what they did is that they got together and they started building robotics for little babies. But it was really expensive, if you can imagine, if you're thinking about the robotics that you see in the labs with like the spinal cord injuries, right? Huge pieces of equipment, hundreds of pounds, very expensive, not helpful for families, right? But great idea. So what he did is he got enlightened One, he was walking through Toys R Us and he saw a ride-on car, and he said, well, instead of teaching babies to drive robots, why don't we teach babies how to drive cars? It's economical, it's logistical, it's simplistic for families to do. So that's kind of how all that evolved. So kids with physical disabilities usually can't even get any kind of powered chair until they're at least 3. And that's like, probably minimum age. But Cole wanted to develop these cars to get kids moving before that. Because there's a huge gap from birth to 3 is there's so much growth and development, right, on kids. And we all know that, even if we haven't studied it. So he's estimated that hundreds of cars have been built everywhere, which is a tiny amount compared to the millions of dollars spent on powered mobility for kids later in life. And he's a selfless man, so he wanted to spread his vision. So what he did is he's traveled across the country and given lectures and workshops to physical therapists and communities and families. And he shared his work with everybody. So here's some of the places that collaborate, and it's a lot more now. And it's all over across the United States, and it's even internationally, and we have 4 in Tennessee alone. So his motto was, if you're not going to drop what you're doing and come work with me, then I'm going to give you what you need to do it where you are. So that's kind of how it got started and created. So he wanted to spread the message. So on his website of University of Delaware Go Baby, he's got lots of videos about how to do the cars and how to make them, and all kinds of stuff. He has got manuals for people, so not everybody's not starting from scratch. At least you have like a blueprint of things to go by. He's done over 30 workshops. So he's done a lot for, I think, the community with that. So now we're going to talk about why early mobility is important. So when we look at children and we think of cognition, cognition isn't defined, especially in little ones, just with like decision making and problem solving, like how we would think of cognition. But cognition also in a child is expansive with perceptual motor, with language, and with social abilities, right? So grounded cognition holds that perceptual motor experiences along with the child's environment and their culture and everything plays a really critical role in cognition. So one of the theories is that physical activity and movement actually drives development in early childhood. Well, if it drives it in early childhood and these kids aren't able to move until they're at least 3 to 4 by themselves, how is that affecting what a child is learning and doing? So there was another researcher who studies infant motor behavior, and she found that a baby learning to crawl spends 20% of every hour crawling. They take over 500 steps, like a crawl is a step, right, in a day, and travel well over 150 feet. A new walker, which is like the walk, walk, plop, a brand new walker, spends 33% of every hour awake walking, takes over 1,000 steps a day, and walks a quarter of a mile. And then toddlers take over 10,000 steps a day and walk between 1 to 2 miles. So if you look at what our kids with physical disabilities are doing, what typically developing children do when they meet those milestones, that's a huge separation gap. So if we look at what our toddlers and preschoolers are doing, they are spending time sitting statically in a chair that they were placed in, and they were placed in that room, and all the decisions were made for them. Or if they have a mobility device, they're pushed where somebody else is pushing them, where somebody else wants them to look at and go to, right? So everybody else is driving that for the child. Or they're on the floor because that's their main mobility of moving, is mainly on the floor and crawling. So I won't bore you too much with this, but all this stemmed from animal research, which we do a lot from and translated over. So this was even back done in the 60s. So what they did is they took a little new kitten and they put them in two groups. And so one set of cats had normal visual experiences, and the cats got 3 hours of movement a day for 6 weeks. And then the other group got 3 hours of movement a day over 6 weeks. But they put this little apparatus on, so the cat couldn't see the rest of his body moving. So it kind of like made, you know, like the dogs wear the big cones. So they were trying to simulate that to take out the visual perception of how babies and infants learn how to move. So what they found from that is that after the 6 weeks, when they went to go put the cat down, the cat that could see all the time got ready, put their feet out, just like we do with kids. Stand them up, we get ready. And the the cats that had the cone did not get ready at all. Didn't put their feet down, didn't anticipate movement. The next thing they looked at was, so then they did like this visual cliff for the cat when they learned how to walk by themselves. So it's like a plexiglass, so they don't really fall off the cliff. So the cats that could see the whole time, when they walked up to the top, they didn't go over the cliff to drop because they used their visual perceptual skills. The kittens that did not went and would fall off the cliff or went past it. So they were not able to visually space where they were going. And third, that reflex of like when you go towards somebody, the kittens that had the visual startled like we do if someone comes towards you, and the other ones did not. So some of it stemmed from basic science research, and then taking that over and translating that physical activity drives development. One is a broad view of physical activity. So physical activity is lots of different things to lots of different people: rolling, crawling, sitting, standing, squatting. But using that to participate and explore and engage in the world is different than actually just even being able to move. And what we need to study is how kids with disabilities use that and how it's so differently from kids that don't have the physical impairment. So when you look at what typical toddlers do on an everyday basis, right? They go and they explore, right? They build social relationships, right? Animals, people. They can touch different surfaces. They understand what up and down is because they actually can move up and down. They can bend their bodies over and not fall over, right? So we learn a lot through just being mobile creatures. So this is just an example, and I'm going to keep it loud because I want you to listen to the language and watch how much toddlers move and what they're doing, how they're exploring, the socialness of what they should be doing, building relationships, amending relationships, building them back up, right? What little kids do, they fight and they bicker and they get into trouble and they throw tantrums. They can go and tell somebody something happened to them, right? So maybe things don't even happen to kids. So remember this as we talk a little bit later about like what we think. So if the movement system is our coined professional identity, then shouldn't we view mobility as a human right for everybody, right? So in the position paper statement from the APTA, we shouldn't own that either. We have to professionally collaborate to understand and fully help grasp the human movement system, which is the philosophy of Go Baby and adaptive play here. And we also need to assume the roles over a lifespan and not put them in episodic cares and silos, right? Especially for people that would have a lifelong disability. So here's another study where they just looked at how kids moved, all right? So they took this and they looked at 2 kids with disabilities and then kids with typical development. And so what they did is they kind of broke these down. So locomotion is like running, crawling, walking, jumping, squatting, that kind of stuff. And so that's what we're looking at is locomotion. So the percentage of time, so kids with typical development spent 22% of their time in a day with locomotion, which came out to 2 hours per day. And if you calculate that out, it would be 68 hours a month and 819 hours a year. If you look at a kid with disability A, they spend 1 hour a day with locomotion compared to 22. 2 hours, 22%, I'm sorry, 1% compared to 22%. 0.1% of the day compared to 2. 3 hours compared to 68, and over the course of a year, 37 hours compared to 819. We're not even sniffing it getting close to anything, right? More involved child, less involved child. So 21% of the time, so 2 hours, 65, 68, 781, not too bad, right? But so we've done these things and we know how kids move and for the amount of time they should be moving and how they're doing it. So again, how could we possibly get our kids with a physical disability to do anything like this if they can't move? So again, we all say that physical development, physical activity drives development. It's driving social, it's driving turn taking, it's driving cognition, it's driving perceptual motor. It's driving what the kids are doing. They're using their physical ability to do other things with their development. I think you get the picture. So another study, they looked at social mobility and how much time kids spend in social mobility, using mobility socially, right? So this is children with cerebral palsy, seizure disorder, tethered cord. So at 1 year of age, typically developing kids, 10%, not even close, right? And it goes up, and we're, again, just not even looking or able to reach anywhere close to the percent of time that they're engaged in social mobility. So using some of the social mobility, what we know about it is that is transforming society by optimizing movement. Sounds like what PTs want to do, right? Or other professions. But there's a lot of fear with having little kids with these powered devices, right? So for example, in Idaho, they said, well, safety is our biggest concern. So when assistive tech reimbursement is filed, we want documentation of how these kids are going to be safe. And then the state, for example, is called. So if a child that uses a power chair runs into a desk or other children in the classroom, the state's called. So my thing, our thing, not mine. But for typical children, do we document safety and their ability to walk? What about your clumsy child that falls all the time? Or the kids that can constantly bump into everybody or run into the walls, right? Or kind of slide down the stairs, right? So we don't do that. Karen Adolph, the one that did all the walking, found that new walkers fall over 100 times a day when they're learning to walk. So falling is part of normal, typical development. I don't mean pathological falling, I mean like fall, like walk, walk, fall, right? So in school, if a child hits somebody or does something wrong, we don't take their ability to walk away. or move away, right? They have to have consequences so they can adjust and learn to use it more safely. But again, we don't take that innate human right away, right? So, 5% of children out of 95 million under age 14 have a disability. And half of them have a severe disability, so they can't move. So instead of being safety driven, which it still is, we don't need to take those human rights away from the kids. So we say early and for every behavior and for everywhere and for everyone, with everyone, and all of the time that we can get, right? So where are toddlers with mobility impairments, right? So here's our traditional assistive tech mindset of what we do with kids. So, we have a readiness specific criteria. Well, are they ready for power? Are they ready to do this? We also want to focus on a targeted behavior. So like stepping on the treadmill. We even do that with babies. We put them on, they move their legs. It's a specific targeted behavior that we're still driving, right? We're putting them on there. We want them to walk. We want them to practice, right? I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's just a different way to look at it. Like where to use it. So we always say, oh, can you do this? So the treadmill studies have shown for infants, like for example with Down syndrome, if you put babies on the treadmill at home, 20 to 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, they walk earlier. And that's cited in our literature. But we know so much about the importance of development, but children with special needs still have to demonstrate specific criteria to have access to these assistive devices. So that doesn't make any sense because development doesn't occur in isolation. Like you can't just work on motor and you can't just work on, cognition without using the other, social and those kind of things. So many domains are all co-emerging at the same time. So, and if they're in labs doing things, then you need, requirements. If they have power, the parents have to get a lift on their van to get them there, and then they have to have a ramp on their house if they have a power chair in their house. Because I've learned that mistake working in Illinois, getting somebody a power chair, and then they lived on the 3rd floor renting an apartment. I was like, oh, yeah, so they used it at school. But life doesn't really occur in 20 to 30 minute sessions a few times a week, right? We know that life happens all the time. So putting these restrictions on, while some of them are good to drive mobility, doesn't really make sense either, especially for young children and families trying to go out and do things. So what is our gold standard for what we should try to be doing? So these are kids with disabilities. We have our pre-intervention and we measure those. And then we do the intervention and they usually get a little bit better, right? Still huge gap, right? Still huge gap of intervention, pre-intervention to typically developing. And we kind of looked at some of those charts before. Oh, more. So we say that when do we start? We start now, and we focus on everything. And we can use them everywhere and all the time. So what we're learning about compliance in like the assistive tech devices we provide to children, like ride-on cars that we're developing, parents asked, can you put the children in 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week? Again, but is that really the gold standard either? Even if we give them the car? Well, what if they can't even bring the car to the preschool? Well, that doesn't make sense either, right? If you're using it 20 minutes a day, again. So it's not acceptable to ask parents to only give their children these limited opportunities to move and be social when we know their peers are doing it all day, every day, all the time. So we have some studies on early powered mobility. Now, a lot of these are small, 1 or 2 sample case sizes. But even back from the 80s, they found that children with disabilities, so what they did is they actually gave younger children a power chair, and then what happened is that their peer interaction and their communication and everything got better, even walking, if they were ambulatory. If they weren't ambulatory, then obviously that's not going to get better. There was also a case study for an 18-month-old that got a power chair that had SMA. So that child will never walk if they have this form of SMA, but that doesn't mean anything's wrong with their brain or their mind, right? So giving them the power chair helped them go and explore, and then everything else got better on the domains, but physical mobility didn't, because that wouldn't get better. And then in 2009, they even put a 7-month-old in one of the first mobility devices. And then there's been, a few things, and then we're getting more and more with some of these ride-on cars, and they're still only single case studies, so it's still harder to present, for funding, to get lots of, money to really see how things work. Here was a single case study. So this was just done a few years ago. So they gave a child with Down syndrome a mobility device. And what we know from Down syndrome is that most children that have Down syndrome learn how to walk. It's usually a little bit later, but for the most part, they all generally learn how to walk. But what happened is that all of their scores went up on their testing, and they still learned how to walk. So it gave them a vehicle to still increase their scores on their self-care, their mobility, and their social domains, and they still learned how to walk because they were still working on walking, right? But they gave this device so they could interact more with their peers and around, become independent. So over here, the social goes up, and this is baseline, pre-intervention, post-intervention. Then they did another case study where they took 3 really medically complex kids. So ones that had significant impairments that were not able to move or maybe sit on their own, period. And what they did is they also looked at some of those same skills, but they also looked at their facial expressions, whether they were positive or negative. So these are positive 100% of the time, and these are negative, right? So even them being able to express how they feel through use of a power mobility even shows that. So we're gonna take a quick look at, so this is one of the little girls from the study. And so she's even on a vent. So we're talking medically complex. So her facial expressions is the only way for her to communicate right now, right? She can't talk. Look at how happy she is. She's moving. And she's the kind of kid that would have been in the chair, only pushed to where somebody wanted her to go or be or see or do. And now she's trying to cause trouble, and she's communicating, she's looking at her dad, or therapist, whoever, saying, look at how happy I am, this is awesome, I'm proud of myself, look what I can do. So they made a few different kind of cars for this study, and they had a seated car where they only sat, they had a standing car where you could stand up in the car, and then they had a power car. Let me stop. Okay, so this was the most recent study. This just came out in our PEDS journal this month. So this was also a case study about a child with a disability in his whole classroom. All right, so they gave him a ride-up standing car to use in his preschool setting. All right, so this is his preschool setting, like on the playground. What the kids are doing. They're all, look at this, they're together, they're close. They're communicating, they're playing, they're doing what they want to do, right? And so what they looked at in this study is they looked at what kids do on the playground, what kids do in their classroom, and then what kids do like in a gymnasium, like the 3 places you go when you're in preschool. So they looked at physical activity, which is all these on the bottom. So that was anything from like laying down, crawling, kneeling, sitting, squatting, running, all those things. The darker colors are the typical preschoolers, and the lighter colors are the children with disabilities, the child with a disability. So if it's what's really interesting, and I know you probably can't see all this, so I'll just tell you the bottom line, is that if you watch, I'll tell you, well, let's watch the video first. So if you watch how the kids interact in his classroom, he's right here, and he can even walk too. So it's not like he can't, he's got crutches, but he walks and he's modified independent with his ambulation skills, right? But that's him sitting in the sandbox, can't move. Nobody's playing with him, right? Nobody's really coming over to him to interact, no social mobility, right? Because in this graph, we found, look at, this is his time sitting compared to typically developing kids on the playground. Significantly more. Because when most kids are on a playground, they don't sit for very long, right? And he spends a lot of time standing, but less time walking than the other kids in the class. And now even when he's in the gym, he's playing and he's moving. But who's he interacting with? The teacher. So is that good? Sure. But is that what they were doing? Nobody was just playing with the teacher, right? Because that's not what typical toddlers do when they're on playgrounds.
No, that's adorable, boy.
So look, he goes and gets the ball, and then where does he go back to? By the teachers, right?
I'm playing ball with Miss Jessica.
Playing with my teacher, which isn't totally abnormal either, but nobody's really playing with him either. He's happy. So what this graph showed too is that, oh no, that's the next one. Okay, so that's him in his classroom. Oops. So what they did is they graphed it, and blue is the typically developing children. X, he had no car, and then the green, they gave him the stand-up car. So what happened with all this is that when he had no car, look at all the time he spent with the teacher. This is typically, look at how much it goes down once he gets the car, right? So he's spending less time with the teacher on the car because he's probably spending more time with his peers, right? So peer interaction, typically developing kids spend 35-ish% of their time interacting with others. When he doesn't have the car, way down, not even close. When he has the car, way higher. So there was definitely significant results with his car, with social interaction and teacher interaction. So this is him with his car. Remember the first two videos? Remember those?
Cell phones.
Don't get in front, right? There you go. What's up, dude? How you doing?
So people are racing him. They have formed a game, right?
Hey, dude.
They're talking to him. He's talking with them.
How's it going?
Big difference, right?
Up, Jack?
Different study. They did a 40-minute session and they tracked a child that had Down syndrome. He was 33 months, and his 3-year-old brother who was 3. So still fairly close in age, probably a year gap. So look at how much more the 3-year-old moved in 40 minutes compared to the child that had Down syndrome that can still probably move, but not very well or easily, right? So in this study, they used a sit-to-stand car. So every time he stood up, it moves. So a different kind of car, but and he's trying to go for the toy, motivated. He sits down, it stops. Cause and effect. Here's another child. Now in his environment, now he's in his own home using the car. Again, safety with the bars so we're not falling out and running into things. Happy, independent. Participating in his home.
I think that little dance is what we'll use to prove to people that kids like driving cars.
Yeah.
Just a different type of study that they used.
Motorcycle.
Oops. Another study they looked at. So here's the pre-training. They looked at cognition, language, and motor. They used the Bailey, which is a good gold standard test for development, overall development in our field. Gave them the wheeled mobility, and pre-test scores are red, post-test scores are blue. Right? These are the percentile ranks for the testing to see how much improvement they made. So he was controlling it with the joystick. Did you guys see can you see the joystick up here? So this is a little bit different car, right? It's more high tech. It can move forwards and backwards. He can turn with it. It's a little bit different than like some of the traditional Go Baby cars. Okay. Excuse me. So, friends are harder to make when you're not mobile. Do we all get that message? Right? It promotes social mobility. That's why it's so important, amongst other things, right? These are some more of the traditional Go Baby Go cars that people are making across the country. A lot more low tech than some of the ones we saw in the videos, but different programs have different philosophies. We'll talk about that in a minute. So who needs race cars? I say it gives kids a chance. We say it gives kids a chance, and it transitions from they can't to of course they can. The medical model is wait and see, high cost, high commitment. The race cars level the playing field, social engagement with peers and family, opportunities for play and exploration, and natural context for all their developmental pieces. If they can move around their home, all around their classroom, around the playground. And anything, so this creates a different approach to a child that is mobile, and it can change expectations, right? Because a lot of stuff happens with like learned helplessness with children or adults with disabilities, right? You have this learned helplessness of going in. So if you can change expectations right from the beginning and have that be part of it, it can make such a huge difference. So the future is now for Go Baby, all right? So when we looked at why we thought it was so important here in rural Appalachia, in our beautiful area of the country we live in, we want some pediatric technology that encourages troublemaking. That's what kids are supposed to do. They're supposed to learn and get in trouble and explore and do things they're not supposed to, so they learn yes and no. but we live in an outdoor culture here. So a lot of activities that families do have hiking and swimming and fishing and all kinds of outdoor activities, right? And it's important to provide technology and training with these children so they can explore and participate in the culture we have here, right? So without getting into this, this is the country's economic status in Appalachia. This is 2002, this is 2010, this is 2016. So the red is the distressed areas in Appalachia, right? So distressed economically, all right? So here's Tennessee and Virginia, we're like right here, and then we're right here, and then we're still right here, right? So things aren't still changing a ton, they're definitely getting better. But 84 regions in 2016 were still distressed, and we're kind of right, we're not right mecca center of the red, but we're close, and we have enough red in our whole central Appalachian region. Here's high school rates. So completion rate of high schools. High school, college, all right? So the dark blue means only 55 to 72% completed, high school or college. The dark green, spatters, is 72 to 78% completed college or high school. And light green is 75 to 85% completed. So the only ones that completed that is the same as the national average is the very lightest ones. College, high school. Again, here we are, this little region. The progress and the regress, right? So nearly every country in central Appalachia, which is like our area of Appalachia, has reported poverty rates of at least 20% from 2007 to 2011. And only 60% of people 25 to 64 are in the labor force compared to 78% nationally in our area.
Did you just say 25% are in the labor force?
Only 60% of
I'm
people
sorry.
between 25 to 64, which is
Okay, all right.
the main age
Sorry,
when you
sorry.
work. So here only 60% are in the labor workforce compared to 78% nationally. So I say we have a greater need too, right? That's why another of the reasons we thought it was so important. Okay, so again, and then we looked at some of that stuff. Tennessee Early Intervention System. So Early Intervention System, if you don't know, is a birth to 3 program for kids with either delays or a disability that they're born with, like spina bifida, cerebral palsy, or ones that they acquire, throughout. So we are in this we're in this region. So this is the First Tennessee region. That's what we're called. Excuse me. And that's Carter, Unicoi, Washington, like all the. So the principles of early intervention is that we want to support families in promoting their children's development, child participation in family and community activities, and encourage participation by using embedded strategies. Well, doesn't that sound like Go Baby? But I think there's a disconnect between what's happening in early intervention here also and what is being promoted with the whole Go Baby project. So these are all broken out for you, but pretty much this is all the First Tennessee. It's broken up by county, so Carter, Greene, Johnson, Washington County. So 2007, we served in early intervention total for the whole year 323 kids in all those counties. And then it goes to 318, 319. So in the low 300s over years. We made a big jump in 2012. I don't know if there was a big drive here before I got here to try to promote early detection. I don't know, but big jump, right? But still, we're still not seeing a ton for all of the people that live in all those areas, correct? So when we break this down, you can break down early intervention. So what we know about early mobility is that we need to start early. So that means we need to start before a year. So in 2012, out of those 431 kids served that year, 61 were 0 to 1. 144 were 1 to 2, and 226 were 2 to 3. We are not getting them early, right? And that was the year that we had the most. So some of these years we're serving 35 children out of 319 were in Bertha 1, and then everybody else was older. We know we can't start that late. So there's just not nearly enough kids getting services early enough or being detected early enough. Here's another one, then this is just rank order. Again, this is our First Tennessee area, and it's split up by counties. And then this is how many kids are served, 0 to 1, and this is how many kids are served, 0 to 3, right? So it's rank order, and this is from 2014. So it looks at like the number and the percentage and the difference. So in 2016 or 2014, we only served 66 infants that were birthed to 1, which is still better since the numbers we looked at are trending up, right? Out of 502. So still, even last year or 2 years ago, we were still only getting a small percentage of the kids, you know, early enough. Last thing about early intervention is that in our region, again, the First Tennessee, only 68% are seen in the natural environment. So the natural environment means the home. So that means a huge percent are leaving to go to get services outside of their home into clinics, which is good because they're still being seen, but that's not the natural environment. And as we know from mobility, here you're sitting in the therapy gym with just the therapist, working on what the therapist wants them to work on. Now, it might be something the child likes, but here you're in their natural environment, moving around, exploring that. So in our region too, so 80% of the state met their standards for, you know, natural environment, and we're still down at 68. So that means they're not being seen in the home, where they learn the best. All right, on to our team. So this is Milligan Engineering. So this is Greg. He couldn't be here tonight. He really wanted to. He is the director of the engineering program at Milligan, and he has a lot of experience. He's very passionate about the work, and he is building the boxes for us with his students. And building manuals so we all can go build them as well. And so this is Leighton. This is our first little guy that we built the car for. And so this is us, some of us in the lab, showing him how to, you know, build the cars and do all that thing. So that's Milligan. Here's the lab over there. This is Pete from Rocky Top, which is in Knoxville. So he's helped us out a ton too. All a collaboration, but students are there help building, and then here's just an example of like how to modify the car. You put the box on the back and all that. Public health, the College of Public Health has joined us. So Dr. Stutz, so he is really about practical solutions, low cost, to reach as many people as possible. So he has a public Earth project, so he wants to use all available resources to transform health. So he has been a big help, and he has lots of students that come that learn about health globally to improve the health status of everybody in our region. And then ETSU Physical Therapy is also a partnership in this collaboration. And then there's a wide variety of community therapists that also have joined in to help start this. And there's a lot of volunteers, all and more, but there was a couple core that are sitting here tonight with me that really were like, we gotta get this started. And then build it out, because we can't have this if we don't have relationships with the community and you guys and everybody, because where am I gonna get the kids? You know, I just teach here. how, people wouldn't think of going to Milligan, for something, to an engineer, right? So it's all you guys that are going to help drive our program and find us kids that need it. So when we were kind of putting this together, like of how we wanted to do it, we kind of looked at some of the other programs and saw what they did. So here's Go Baby Memphis. So Birdie started that over there. She kind of coined it. So she did, and Cole Galloway went there with her, or went there to present with to all her students. So she did more of a generic car build. So she found 12 families, with community therapists. The PT students went and helped work with the families to see the mobility needs of the children, what seating things do they need. And then they built a lot of cars with like a seating system in this red car. And then all the kids all got the red car. So that's one way to do it. And then there's a Go Baby Music City. So that's in Nashville at Belmont University. So Teresa Plummer is heading that one up. And she's an OT there. And so she also has car day builds for people. And what she did is that she builds them for families with their students. So how would you build a roll cage for a kid who's 10 months and has posterior pelvic tilt and thoracic curve, right? So we're still using all of our terms when we're developing seating and positioning for these kids, right? In our brains. But she also made giveaway cars. So she made cars for all of the therapy clinics in her area for kids to trial when they came in. So that's a different philosophy too. And then here's Go Baby Go Knoxville, Rocky Top, which is in Knoxville. So this is Pete's. He helped coin this. Now he's an assistive tech guy, so he knows a lot more about seating and positioning. So his cars look really different, right? So he wants to make cars individually for children and make more complex cars so they can turn and go forwards and backwards, but then you need a lot more complex switches and all those kind of things. So he uses Segways, but he'll also build, generic cars, and he puts bumbos or whatever seating things they need and builds them. And so he's done some really cool stuff with kids with like severe mobility impairments, and that's his philosophy. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, and none are right or wrong. We're coming up with ours. And then our students here, it's great for, we have public health students that are going to be doing these projects, PT students, hopefully engineering students, Milligan OT is going to help. So it's really great for the students here too to at least become aware of this to help drive the movement too, along with everybody else. We also have a new program here at ETSU. It's called LEND. So it stands for Leadership and Education in Neurodevelopmental Disabilities. So it's a program for students, and it's brand new from Nashville at Belmont. And so there's students from all disciplines, so PT, OT, speech, audiology, dietitian, social work, counseling. And it's for students, and they go through and they get all this training about advocacy for neurodevelopmental disabilities and leadership and all kinds of stuff. So that's new this year. So there's one PT student in my group, but the other one's an audiologist, one's a speech therapist, one's a social worker. So that group of students is helping us, develop, kind of the structure to how to build a community-based thing like this. So hopefully when they get out, they can maybe take it to, watch us build and bring people together, all for the same common good, no matter what. So they're helping us kind of do some of the cars and get the structure going too. So that's kind of how we developed Adaptive Play. So that Adaptive Play is like the non-for-profit that we developed to house Go Baby Go underneath it. So Adaptive Play's really got three structures. So we have Go Baby Go Appalachia, and then in the future we want to have Adaptive Toy. So then we can make adaptive toys for children and Adaptive Sport, and that is also to create some sports camps and sporting leagues for kids with mobility impairments. but it's definitely been a slow process to do it. So we're trying to figure out our referral sources. So how do we reach out to you and the community to get referrals? You know, we're not sure how many referrals we can take. How do we extend this up into like Southwest Virginia, North Carolina? That's still that area of Appalachia too. You know, we're working on fundraising, so we have to have money to buy the cars, money to buy the boxes, but also student involvement. We're trying to get a class together so people can actually come and build some of the cars and have like a hands-on day if they're interested, and you know, runs and events. We have a lot of stuff we're trying to plan, but it's definitely a slow process, right? Because then you think about liability waivers, and then you have this big collaboration of people doing it, and ETSU might have a different liability than Milligan. That might have a different liability than public health. You know, so it can get a little sticky with that. But that's what we're kind of housed under. But it's really like a collaboration of everybody together, all working for the same cause of getting the kids. And we always need help and volunteers and everything with that. So I just want to show you an example. So this is done at the Go Baby Lab too, just by a different professor. So these are movement activated toys. So when the baby moves, the toy spins. So that's that isn't mobility, but that's more play. Does that make sense? Same thing. So when the baby taps the chair, he gets the thing to spin. So it's a toy versus mobility. Just want to give you an example. He stops tapping, the toy stops. So that's how you adapt a toy, in case you weren't sure. All right, almost done. So thoughts to take home. Independent mobility is a basic human right. Right? We think life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You saw how happy those kids were when they were moving, right? Independent is not easy for even others to tolerate, you know, fear and all that. So I'm so glad you're here to listen, because if people say to you, well, how are we going to do that? And they're too little and they can't do that. You say, oh, no, that's not true, right? And deciding what to do for someone else is dangerous, right? Because we want them to do it, although we've taken away all of their ability to make their own decisions, right? So this is Layton, and that's his family, and that's the team that kind of helped build this first car as a trial. And his mom wrote us a letter, so we're going to end on that. And so I'm going to read it, and this is her words, not mine. So it says, spina bifida. Those two words used to have very little meaning to me. Spina bifida definitely didn't come to mind when I found out I was pregnant. On October 5th, 2011, those two words were center stage in my life. They stole the show. I went from thinking about what outfit he would come home in to what neurosurgeon he would use. Layton was born February 6th. He was a beautiful 6-pound, 9-ounce baby, and he had an L4, L5 defect, a myelomeningocele hydrocephalus, Chiari-1 malformation in his brain, a neurogenic bowel and bladder, but he lights up the room wherever he goes, and he is your typical superhero, loving 4, almost 5-year-old. His mobility is limited to crawling and using a manual wheelchair. So he has never been to a park due to the limited accessibility in our region. He has never gotten to join a Little League team due to lack of resources in our area. When Alex mentioned doing an adaptive power chair for Layton, I was ecstatic. He had never had the chance to roam a yard, a park, or anywhere. There's only so many surfaces he can use with his wheelchair on. This program has opened an entire window for Layton. He gets to experience something your atypical child, and every child deserves that chance. I'm so excited to see how this helps Layton's visual motor skills, following directions, and motor planning. I could never put into words the amount of joy the power toy has given my child. You just want your kid to be your kid. You want them to play and laugh and enjoy life. When they have limitations, it's difficult to see them not being able to enjoy those things. I could never say thank you enough to Adaptive Play and Go Baby, Milligan ETSU, for the opportunity. He's living his life to the fullest. And that's it. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
So how do we get a kid to you? And what constitutes getting kids to you, and how long does it take to build the car? Because if you put them in it too quick and then they grow out of the car, is it adjustable? Is it how much duct tape and redneckery and shoes with it? I mean, I know it's engineering, but I talked to one of the engineering students. He's like, they use plenty of duct tape and pool noodles too.
Yep,
So-
pool noodles, PVC piping, Ride-On toys from Toys R Us. It's all.
So how do we get a kid to you? If we have a kid that we're like, hey, this kid I think is a wonderful candidate, or we have an office full of kids that we think would be wonderful candidates, how do we get them to you, or to you all, or to whomever? What's the process?
We're working on that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, we're working on a referral form
Mhm.
where, when you send in a referral form, you'll request an indoor and outdoor toy. And you'll give some information as far as their driving capabilities, what kind of function that they have. And then what we're looking at doing an evaluation where the therapists and the engineers will kind of do a trial with the child. And then after that, we'll work on the car and then get the final car to the kid. So we're still working on those things, but hopefully we'll get some information to you.
And what's the cost to the family, and do they provide the car? Do you all have cars? Will you accept cars from, like my kids have, or my son is kind of outgrown his.
Yes,
So-
anything.
Yeah. Any cars that you can give us, what we're trying to do is get 2 cars and really do them well. Make sure that they are safe, all the electrical things are checked off. When a kid gets a car, the engineer will check it off. The family will be educated on how to do it and how to use it safely. We've got to get our liability forms together. So right now our goal is to rely 100% on donations and grants. So that is our goal. Right now the car that Layton is in is around $500. So it's quite an expense. But
Will you look at what normal wheelchairs are?
Oh, yeah, it's a fraction. Yeah.
yeah, and so what we're hoping with the nonprofit is to make it a community collaboration. We're hoping to get a workbook so that people can come help us with the electrical and the seating, because there are so many kids in this region that need these cars. Milligan can only make 10 a year. Well, you might need to do 50 or 60 a year. So, that's why our goal is to make a community collaboration, PTs, OTs, speech therapists, engineers from the community, because we want this to be sustainable. And this is our first project with the nonprofit, so as much help as we can get, we'll get, for sure.
I'm talking about within maybe a couple of years of having a car, at least in every pediatric clinic, that you could try mobility with the kids and kind of get it going and talking with the parents and getting it going earlier.
Yeah.
What have other Go Baby organizations around the state done to educate primary care physicians or pediatricians to start to intervene at an earlier age to identify children that could benefit from a program like this and get them to their therapist earlier on and then eventually to you guys? Is there best practice out there? Is there literature? Is there education material you can pass off?
Right now I don't know of much of anything. I know that it's been mentioned that they want us to do a Go Baby presentation at the primary care conference this year that ETSU is doing for primary care, nurse practitioners, PAs, physicians that see kids, in a general practice. So that would reach out to like a small, area, but that's just general. So a lot of pediatricians necessarily wouldn't be there. So, yeah.
I think you guys better prepare yourself for what's to come.
Right.
Because when this word gets out, not only in the medical community, but also just the community as a whole, I can see this as a feature on the news.
Right.
Do something like this, and it's going to draw a lot of public sentiment. And we do some work with TEIS,
Yes.
and we serve 280 children under the age of 3 every week.
So out of those 341, you have 280 of
We
them.
have 280 out of 300, but
Yeah.
341 was 3 years ago.
Yeah,
And we keep
right.
trying to get them earlier too.
Right.
So it's out of our.
That has to be like an incentive push
Yeah.
from the state. So when I was in Illinois, they had that incentive push, like to get their early numbers up. So that was like it's always harder and lower. So they made a huge push with the community to get those early numbers up. But yeah, it takes a village to gather people to do it, to advocate, to get it going, instead of a wait and see, attitude.
Another question.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to do this presentation at the fall state meeting
Yeah.
coming up this year and I would suggest bringing out
Well,
cars
yes.
for people to see.
Yes.
And then bringing in an engineer to
Yes.
speak from the engineering perspective and the cooperation between the
Yeah, if we,
PTs, OTs. and
we'll hopefully have a lot more set up then, about like, so we can give some solid answers about how many cars we can do, and, we'll have the multidisciplinary team there, and
You think you can make a 4-hour program out of this, or would you need
Yeah.
longer? Would you want to do longer?
It can be done either way.
yep. I mean, I can make it as small as an hour, we could make it an all-day thing and have labs and all that, like, I mean, Pete has offered to come down and help us with a lot of stuff too, and he set up his program in Knoxville, and, he did a soldering workshop for us and a whole, like seating, positioning thing for us, so, yeah.
Do you have a general idea of the difference price-wise in his that seemed very personalized versus the ones in Memphis and Nashville that were a little less?
Well, I know like the more generic cars, and I don't mean that in a bad way, it sounds like
Yeah.
that's a bad term, but those are about 200.
Okay.
And so, but those can only go forwards and backwards. And you push it, it goes, it stops,
Okay.
right? And so the Jeep can go forwards and backwards in turns.
They adapted it with the joystick.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more, so it just depends. So if you want to just try the kid out moving forwards and backwards and it's enough, then that's all the kid needs. If they need something more complex, like the Segway, because they have no mobility or they need a lot of positioning, or they have a classroom that's open to using it, then we can make them a more high-tech one. I don't know how much.
The Segway, and then also there's a new thing out called the Wild Thing that has a circular base, so it's that 0-degree turn radius. So we're wanting those for going, they could use them in preschool classrooms because they're such a small turn. And they're costing about $800, I think.
Yeah.
to put together.
But yeah, I would love to trial it at like a child care center, like a child study center at ETSU. I'd like to see if it's feasible to put it in a classroom, or is it more feasible just to use it on a playground, when the kids are running around or at gym time, or.
The boy from here, does he go to regular school or no? Does he use his car mainly at home or?
So when we first started this, we had originally talked about doing an indoor car. And so we had trialed him in the bump over the child ride seat on the Segway, like you saw in one of those pictures. It worked great for him, but he wanted an outdoor car. Like he wanted to go outside. He wanted to go to his grandparents' house and go up and down the hills and those uneven surfaces that he's not been able to do. And so the mom chose to do an outdoor car. So we just gave him the outdoor car in December, and unfortunately we've not had the greatest weather, so they've not had a chance to do that. But he's also gotten a Wild Thing, and so his mom wants us to put his chest strap on it and modify the Wild Thing for him as well. But yeah, he's going to go to kindergarten, and so we're actually going to trial power mobility for him, just a power chair for his kindergarten class.
Oh. Anything else? Yeah.
With the social interactive mobility charts that were shown, how post-mobility adaptive device were the results that were shown on there? I'm just curious. What was the time frame for the post-mobility and social interaction charts?
was that the case study one you were
On the
asking?
case study.
The case studies?
Case studies.
It was like when they got the car.
Well,
they had to practice it
Not
on-
been done yet, so we see what carryover once, the,
Yes. Yeah, we don't know. I mean, and our research is limited and
Yeah.
it's single case studies and we haven't followed the kids and,
and
but, yeah, it's pretty much once they learn how to use the car and manipulate the environment, then they do the post-test and then they saw,
yeah, it's going to show a positive correlation on down the road,
yes.
Which it should.
We'll get Cara on
Not gonna
that.
drop it on
Yeah.
up to where it continues catching on up.
We are, because we're gonna try to develop some outcome measures too for our program here, so we can actually, you know, show the changes in the kids and try to report it so it can get out in the literature, because right now there's not a,
I think that would also help steer which different philosophies seem to
Yes.
bear more
Yep.
fruit down the road.
yeah.
I know when we were trying to get the dates together, you couldn't do it on Tuesday because of your PhD
Because
class.
I'm getting my
and all that.
PhD on
Right.
Tuesday.
So are you doing your PhD? Is this your doctoral PhD smart person stuff? Is this what you're doing? You're just doing it on?
I haven't decided because I'm on the neonatal abstinence syndrome task force too. So it's either gonna be on developmental outcomes of babies born with NAS, or it's gonna be on this, like my whole big dissertation. But both, like in my classes that I'm taking, I get to use both of these projects and study them like in my classes. So one of my classes I can develop some outcome measures and it'll be part of my like PhD work. Yes. Yeah, so I'm definitely doing my PhD around issues in this area of the country. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
So whenever we get all of our marketing referral stuff, what we would love to do is come to all of your clinics and educate you all, as far as how to do referrals and all that. So hopefully, maybe the end of the spring or fall, we'll do that. And we're also on Facebook. So it's Adaptive Play and Go Baby Go Appalachia. So y'all can like us on that and keep updated with what's going on. So.
Thank you.